Hey guys, this is Dave Linhart from FounderSensei. Hey, Nick asked me to record this short video dealing with questions that I often get from entrepreneurs that are starting startups. So just a quick intro, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've created 8 startups over the last 21 years, and 6 out of 8 were technology companies. The other 2 were service companies. Those service companies were successful. Of the 6 technology companies that I started, 5 out of my last 6 were profitable. The ones that I bootstrapped basically were profitable. The first startup I did was funded with $10 million seed round from a venture group. That company was not successful. So I think what I've done pretty well is, gone from concept to profitability with very little money. And so that's what I teach at FounderSensei through this process I created called insight-driven iteration. So we're going to pick up just some of the common questions that we've got. We've got 5 videos. This is the first of 5. And so, let's get into it. This is Dave from FounderSensei. Hey, we're here to teach committed entrepreneurs how to build profitable startups. Thanks for having us here on Founders Live. So top 5 common questions. Nick asked me to put some thought into that. The top 5 common questions I get most often in mentoring and helping entrepreneurs are the following. Where do I start? How can I build a team? Where do I find co-founders? Should I find co-founders? Should I bootstrap or seek funding? What's the best way to build an MVP? How do I know when I should pivot or not? So we're going to do 5 videos in total. The first one, we're just going to deal with the first question, which is where do I start? Where do I start? My best recommendation, I've got 5 points here. The one that, if you don't remember anything from this talk, remember this one. Start with a problem you've experienced firsthand. I think that's the best way to get off to good footing with a startup. And just to give you an example, when I started FounderSensei, it was kind of very relevant to me because I am a serial entrepreneur, and so I knew the challenges that people face in starting startups. So if you look at the problems we solve at FounderSensei, these are all problems that I've personally experienced. Not that I heard about, not that I've theoretically understood, but that I've lived it. So getting customer traction, finding a scalable business model, and acquiring the resources I need to build a business are the top 3 challenges that I face when I create a startup. And so I automatically have empathy and understanding for these problems because I've lived them. And that's really critical. So if you pick a problem that you've personally experienced, you're way ahead of the game. And in order to figure out your focus area, I'd recommend keeping a daily problem journal. This is a journal that you write every day or maybe even write on the spot when it happens. Raise your level of awareness into what's annoying, irritating, problematic, painful for you today. What was the pain that was caused? What would be the gain if I solve this? And what could be a possible solution? So really simple example, I always send my laundry out for wash and fold and for dry cleaning. And I like to automate all my bills. But the thing about laundry is that the bill is different every month. And I have this old mom and pop laundromat who won't do an automatic credit card billing. So I tried automated process of sending them a check, a fixed amount. But it's always wrong because the amount is always off by a couple dollars, $5, $10. So every month they like calling me, like, can you give me $5? And it's so annoying. It drives me crazy. And so I asked myself this question, like, why isn't there a payment platform for all these mom and pop small businesses? So that's an example. I've been keeping a problem journal now for about 10 years, and I have literally thousands of ideas in this problem journal, just by raising my level of awareness of the kind of problems that I've experienced firsthand. And all of my startups have been created based on those types of problems that I've experienced firsthand. So start with a problem you've experienced firsthand. The second part, really important, and a lot of these are going to be mindset changes. Start by acknowledging every entrepreneur makes assumptions that are wrong. When you first start out and you envision how this business will operate, how it will work, what the business model components, you should acknowledge that you're going to be wrong about a lot of this stuff. And that's to be accepted and expected, and that's totally okay. I think a lot of people have this startup hero model in mind. It's a very linear path. we have an idea, it turns into a vision, we build out the vision, we sell it, and we reach a $10 billion valuation. Like that's the story that you read in an article somewhere or in the news media. But that's just not how it works. This model is totally wrong. First of all, the path is not linear. The path is a very twisted road that goes through all kinds of different rabbit holes and durations and dead ends and backtracking. This is not a linear path at all. It's also, nothing ever goes according to plan in a startup. This looks like a very neat plan, but it's never going to play out that way. The other thing is most startups fail. Most startups don't reach a $10 billion valuation, so you need to recognize that. And there's just lots of failure along the way. So I think that's the biggest shock for people when they do the first startup is how wrong they were about things. And just to show like a really good example, I go through this case study on Dropbox. The reason this is a cool case study is Harvard Business School did a case on Dropbox, and it looked at the difference in Drew Houston's idea in terms of the business model that he originally conceived of versus what he actually pivoted to. And you can see almost in every dimension, how long it would take to build this solution, who the target customer was, how we're going to acquire them. If you go through every aspect of the business model, he was completely wrong about everything. So how could Dropbox be a successful $10 billion company if he was wrong about everything? Well, he didn't care so much about being right as he did about being successful. So he was willing to learn and he was willing to pivot. And I think you want to go in with that open mindset. So acknowledge that you're going to be wrong about stuff. And this is not about your ego. This is about being successful, not being right. So the other thing is start by recognizing you're experimenting and you're not executing yet. When you first start up, you have no idea, playing off the second point, you don't know what the ultimate business model is going to be. So you're experimenting. This is not like, and this is a real problem for people who've worked at existing businesses before, or they worked at big companies, where big companies have a defined business model and they're really focused on executing, where a startup is a completely different animal. You don't know what the business model is yet. You have hypotheses and you need to run experiments to prove that. So one of the best slides I've seen on this comes from Steve Blank, steveblank.com. This was a couple of years ago. He put this together, really defining the difference between what an existing business does on the left. They essentially improve their business model. Their business model is known, and they improve that through better execution by developing forecasts and plans and just executing better. A startup is not a small version of a big company. It's something fundamentally different. What you're trying to do is you're inventing a new business model from the beginning, something that's never been done before. And so you're not executing. Instead, you're searching. You're like a mad scientist. You run experiments. Oftentimes those experiments blow up and you pick yourself up and dust yourself off, document it, learn from it, and you pivot. So you can see that in terms of the process and activities, it's totally different. And some people are good at the improving phase and executing a known business model. Others are good at inventing new ones. But recognizing that they're totally different, and when you're first starting out, you are trying to invent a business model through experimentation, and you're not quite ready to execute yet. The other thing is because you're in this experimental mode, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Nobody knows how this experiment is going to turn out. The whole reason you're doing an experiment in the first place is that you don't know how it's going to turn out. You can have a guess, you can have a hypothesis. I mean, it's what we call a guess, but you don't really know until you run the experiment. And oftentimes you're just wrong, and that's okay. We call that an insight, or as my business partner Paul calls it, an aha moment. Something that you've like, oh, aha, that's different than I expected. What's going on here? So you have to deal with the fact that you're in this highly uncertain environment, which is going to generate a lot of fear. And the reason it generates a lot of fear is just how our brains are wired and how they're architected. The brain and the primitive aspects of the brain, the limbic system and the reptilian brain, were created for our survival. when there were predators larger than us running around, eating us for lunch. We developed a survival mechanism where we would jump into fight or flight mode. And that's the primary kind of primitive section of the brain. And the thing about it is, later on, we had our more creative problem solving aspect of the brain in the prefrontal cortex that was developed later. So, in the prioritization of how the brain is architected, when there's fear, that creative part of your brain actually shuts down and so all the resources can be directed into the primal fight or flight. And you get this thing like called tunnel vision. So imagine if a tiger was running at you, your brain completely focuses on the threat in the moment and deals with the threat and literally cannot see anything else. Can't stop to talk about anything else, as you can imagine. They're just trying to deal with the threat. So when you're afraid of failure, when you're afraid of, running out of money, when you're afraid of anything, that no one's going to like your idea, that your product's going to tank, all this stuff, you basically are shooting yourself in the foot because your creative brain, the thing that you need the most at that time to see the creative options, is basically shut down. And so you have to deal with that reality and recognize that you're in a highly uncertain environment and get comfortable with that. And the best way to do that, I think, there's a lot of mindfulness and resilient psychology that we put into FounderSensei, that we realized entrepreneurs were struggling with this even more so than the business model stuff, actually. But what I would recommend everyone starting is just doing some really simple meditation. Start getting into meditation, even if it's just 5-10 minutes a day, even if it's just a couple seconds of taking a couple deep breaths before you go on this customer call, or taking a couple deep breaths before you sit down with the team and talk about what we need to do. Work on quieting your mind, calming your mind, quieting your thinking, quieting that incessant stream of thoughts that keeps you up at night. Work on and practice calming your mind and disidentifying with those thoughts so that you can have space in your consciousness for creative ideas to come in. Because when your brain is buzzing with compulsive, incessant thinking, there's just not a lot of room for creativity. So I recommend meditation. We don't have a lot of time to get into different types of meditation techniques. I've been meditating now for about 4 years, and honestly, I've gone off and on it, but I continue to make, progress is not the right word, but continue to deepen my level of consciousness around startup activity, and it's just really, really helpful. Adds to my resilience, adds to my creativity, and generally helps me from freaking out. So here are the 5 things, just in summary, in terms of where do I start. Start with a problem you've experienced firsthand. It's the best way to understand the problem is by getting firsthand experience with it. The best way to get empathy with customers is to be one of those. Be one of the customers. Put yourself in their shoes and have real empathy for what they're going through. Start by acknowledging that every entrepreneur makes assumptions that are wrong. Yes, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, every entrepreneur makes assumptions that are wrong. Start by recognizing you're experimenting and you're not executing yet. There'll be a time for execution, but right now we're experimenting and we don't know what's going to happen. Face the reality of the uncertainty that is just inherent in the startup process and the failure that comes with it. And then start a process of meditating to calm your mind, quiet your thinking, disidentify with your thoughts. Hey, so those are the 5 tips I've got for you guys on how to start or where to start. So hopefully that was helpful. If you're looking for more information and more help from us, you can go to FounderSensei.com. That's SENSEI.com. You can sign up for free blog notices, which includes tips and tricks and other tips on resilient psychology and business model validation. And then we also have paid services as well, like our Founders Workbench platform, where we teach you how to build profitable startups, one-on-one coaching, group sessions, stuff like that. So if you're interested, go to foundersensei.com, or you can contact me directly. My email is dave@foundersensei.com. So thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time.